Hello, everyone. We're going to give everybody a chance to filter in before we get started. People are still coming in. While we're waiting, if you want to share in the chat, what was your favorite dish on your Thanksgiving holiday? I'd love to see what everybody was doing over the last week. And then we'll get started pretty soon. All right, we still got people trickling in. Leftovers are good.
I tell you what, there's just something
Yeah,
about them, after a
indeed.
day or two when the flavors have been melding in the fridge. And
There is. My family's heritage is Jewish and German, and we do sauerkraut as part of the Thanksgiving holiday, and that's just like my favorite with pork in it and stuff. It's amazing. All right. Now let's give it about one more minute, and then we'll get started with everybody. Stuffing. Stuffing is always good. And stuffing is one that there's 19 different ways to make it, right? So sausages, onions, oysters. Oyster stuffing's really good. That's a Maryland thing. All right. All right, well, let's get started. Um, so I want to welcome everybody. We're going to use the Q&A tab when you have questions, and we'll hit questions since the topic's pretty meaty. We'll go back to all the questions towards the end of the presentation, but please use your Q&A feature to submit your questions, and I promise we'll get to all of them. And then you'll receive an email with a recording of this within 24 hours, so keep an eye out for that. Obviously today, my name is Jan Weinberg Wood. I'm the Senior Managing Vice President overseeing healthcare here at BWF. By background, I am a retired Chief Development Officer for a mid-sized health system in Maryland, and thrilled to be here with you today.
I am Josh Laborde. I've been with BWF for just over 3.5 years now. I currently hold a position focusing on product and technology innovation. I came to BWF from a 24 hospital health system where I was the director of philanthropy operations. And I currently volunteer on the faculty for the Association of Healthcare Philanthropy's Madison Institute. So while I support clients across all nonprofit sectors, I'm very passionate about healthcare philanthropy.
All right. So really our goal today is to give you a clear, understandable overview of what is donor AI, what are its capabilities, what are the opportunities to advance the work you're already doing, and when is the right time. So really get those questions in the Q&A if we're not addressing them, but we're really going to try and make donor AI less mysterious and really allow you to apply what you're doing in your own shop and how AI can advance that.
So in order to do that, let's start off with a few definitions so that we can kind of get a common understanding of what is AI. So when we talk about AI, and I think this has gotten somewhat confusing or somewhat blurred, especially the last couple of years with the proliferation of some of the things we're going to talk about. But when we talk about AI today, we're really talking about technology that's made to learn and respond like humans. So we'll talk a little bit about what AI is not, but when we say AI, it's really how the technology is being applied to make decisions and provide information the way a human would. And this generally, the vast majority of the time, is built on top of machine learning algorithms. So in machine learning, the technology is programmed to follow algorithms that allow it to learn and adapt and change without human intervention. So that's really the key there. When we talk about true AI and we talk about machine learning, it really is simulating that human type of activity, but without a human having to be involved with its processes. Now, there are different types of AI that we're going to talk about today. And one of the things I want to agree on is kind of the definition of predictive modeling. And predictive modeling is really taking information and using it to predict something that's going to happen in the future, right? And when that comes to AI, now we're talking about using those machine learning algorithms to do those predictions. So there is predictive AI. Now, of course, predictive modeling can be done and has been done for a long time using statistical and other type of regression-based um, modeling methods, right? But when we're talking about predictive AI, it's really leveraging the AI and the machine learning to do those predictions. And then natural language processing is a discipline or an aspect of AI that really allows the technology to, interpret, understand, make sense, and generate responses with natural language and in a way that we're used to communicating. Languages are complex. They evolve over time. My wife actually studied some linguistics in her collegiate career. She's telling me I'm an engineer. I don't think that way. I think things should be set. But she talks to me about how the language evolves. It's also very nuanced, right? So this discipline in AI is something that's really significant in terms of interpreting those nuances and dealing with that evolution of language. Machine learning combined with natural language processing, which leverages some machine learning techniques, but those two things combined have really been key to what has brought us large language models. And when I'm talking about large language models, these are models that are built using very deep learning algorithms across huge, ginormously large data sets. I mean, it's almost unfathomable how large these data sets are when we're building these large language models. But using that natural language processing, we're able to interact with these large language models in a way that feels very natural to us. And using the machine learning algorithms, the large language models are able to take the data that it has been trained on and produce results or produce responses to what we're giving it. And that's really what generative AI is. Generative AI leverages large language models to produce responses based off of a prompt or based off of some certain inputs. So if you need more clarification on that, drop it in the Q&A. We'll circle back to it. But these are some very significant key terms that I feel like are really critical to our conversation today when we're talking about AI. And just as critical, I feel like, is talking about what's not AI. Okay. Most chatbots on websites and the automated phone response systems, they're not actually AI. They are very programmed to deal with responses on very specified paths, right? If these keywords come up, give these responses. If they hit this button, send them to this other menu, right? It's very programmed. It's very rule-based automation. So when we're talking about workflows and we're talking about things like automated email drip campaigns, where it's very, okay, if they clicked on this link, then we're going to send them this other email. There's no real decision making being used there in an AI way. It's really automation that's coming into play. And this has been accessible to us for a really, really long time, right? Because this, ever since computers and technology have evolved, has been accessible to us. The static predictive models that I mentioned earlier, that's not AI. So if we're doing forecasting and if we're doing some kind of regression analysis or so forth, that's a very programmatic way of leveraging technology, but it isn't that AI, right? It isn't responding as a human would. Also, rule-based scoring. I know a lot of organizations have engagement scores, affinity scores, things along those lines. That when I was at the health system I was at, we built out an affinity score. It's very rule-based, right? But it's not evolving over time on its own. It's not making decisions as a human would. It's simply applying those rules to the information that it has. It's not mining massive amounts of data. Big data was the big buzzword before, right? To extract insights and have those insights inform what decisions it makes or what next steps are. It's really just following very logical based algorithms.
So I love this quote because AI is a tool. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's not going to be the silver bullet, but it is an incredibly valuable tool when used properly to exponentially create sustained growth in your program. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how to use it in that way.
So I gave the definitions and I spoke a bit about predictive modeling and predictive AI. And I really want to spend, some of our time today focusing on that because this has been around for quite some time. And I don't know that a lot of people realize that or understand that when they hear AI today, they think about generative, which we will spend some time thinking about. But the predictive has not only been around for some time, but has been used in fundraising and engagement for some time. And some of the areas that it's been used in, prospect identification is a big area, right? We can take predictive modeling and leverage AI and use predictive AI to help identify prospects. And we'll talk more about that specifically later on too. But action recommendation, some of the tools that are out there today from that leverage AI will help try and suggest or recommend what the next best action to take is with engaging with a constituent or in moving a donor along in the solicitation cycle, right? And if you think about these, you actually interact with these quite often, I would imagine. Right. If you watch a streaming service like Netflix, Netflix is recommending other movies that you might like or other series that you might like. Some of that started out as not AI and just very rules based, but most of those organizations today leverage AI for that. Amazon's another good example. If you shop at Amazon, if you're doing your Christmas shopping right now, and Amazon saying, hey, here's a deal you might like, or hey, here's a product you might like. It is taking all of that data that that organization has about all of their buyers' buying behavior and using that to recommend actions for you. Donor journey mapping. Um, this has been used for quite some time, especially in the marketing side of things. I said that drip campaigns are not built on AI, and they're not, right? It's very, if they click, if they open, do this. If they haven't, wait this amount of time, then send that. But when we're looking at trying to figure out with our different segments of donors, how is their journey with our organization really progressing? What are the most common paths that they're going down from the time that they start interacting with our organization to the time that they make their first gift to the time that they make their first major gift, right? AI for a while now has been able to be leveraged for helping us figure that out. First, figure out what are the different personas, right? What are the different segments of donors we should be looking at? And then within those segments, how do those segment journeys different when we talk about interacting with the organization? Business simulation is one that has been used to some extent, but is being used more and more now. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as well. But this is really where we can use AI to just basically work through a variety of different scenarios at scale, right? So unlike using statistical modeling for business simulation, where we say, okay, here's maybe a half dozen simulations or scenarios that we want to know how it's going to impact us, right? Whether that's our annual plan or a campaign or what we're looking at there, we can say, okay, here are 100 or 200 or 1,000 different scenarios, and how are they going to impact us? And then what are the probabilities around those, and what are the likeliness around those? And then constituent perception. So this, I feel like, is a relatively newer, maybe the newest application of predictive AI. But this really is around helping us be able to look at our constituent base, right? And make determinations about how some of those maybe different personas perceive us and how they think and how they feel about us, right? We get some indication about that based on their giving, and their giving may actually be an input to the predictions that are made, but it really allows us to draw some conclusions that then we can use to inform our strategic decision making. And then, of course, generative AI. For the last year or two, this has been the buzz. This is really where things have kind of blown up in terms of endless possibilities around leveraging AI and what we talked about earlier in terms of the large language models and interacting with them with natural language, right? Content generation is the most common use here. They can generate content, written content that can be used in a variety of communications. It can generate, images and videos, even though those aren't probably as good as we would love them to be, right? It is useful. And also with the large language models can generate content from an AI perspective that maybe isn't content that we're looking to pass on, but maybe is content that we're going to use as an input, right? If you've ever leveraged the ChatGPT or Copilot or one of these other large language models to kind of brainstorm or think through something or take something you've already done and use that model to help try and enhance it or improve it or just modify it for a different audience or things along those lines. There's a lot of good applications and uses and usefulness of the generative AI large language models that are out there. And then task wizardry. This is kind of a little bit of a blurry line when we get to what's not AI, what's really just kind of automation. And then if we're starting to leverage the large language models to do some of this automation and help us infer or make decisions that we're not able to completely program. So here, when we start getting into some of the chat bots that aren't just being programmed to respond to certain prompts, but leveraging the large language models and the deep learning that has occurred to determine how that chat bot should direct folks or how that chat bot should interact with folks. That's where you get into that task wizardry. And then we've talked about predictive and we've talked about generative, and I want to speak specifically to BWF's donor AI offering because this is really our reference point and a lot of what we're sharing and a lot of what we're talking about today. But our donor AI offering takes the industry leading predictive modeling that we've been doing for about a decade and a half, using some of the statistical techniques and the other techniques we've used for predictive modeling and enhancing it and leveraging AI now and donor AI to really do some of those things we talked about with predictive modeling in terms of the prospect identification, in terms of the business simulation, which I know Jan is going to talk more about in a little bit. But just wanted to be, for clarity's sake, everyone understand that we have our donor AI predictive modeling. That is where kind of it's the lens that we typically bring to these type of AI discussions. So I do want to spend a minute now before I hand it over to Jan, just speaking a little bit more about um, how AI is built and how it is deployed. For our donor AI offering that I just mentioned, we've partnered with IBM and we leverage Watson. And the reasons that we've done that, I feel like speak to the larger conversation around AI. But we looked at who in the AI space, because AI has been around for half a century, even though it's become much more accessible and more available to us today. But who in this space has really pioneered it? You probably heard about when IBM came up with their solution that beat the chess masters back in the day or that beat the Jeopardy champions or whatever. But they're very much an innovator in the AI space, and we partner with them. Security, we'll talk a little bit more about risks and limitations around AI, but security is obviously at the forefront of anything that we do with data, whether we're talking about HIPAA or we're talking about other regulations around data privacy and security. And IBM, we know through their work with the private sector and their work with government agencies, put security at the forefront of their solutions. And then you start looking at things like scalability and flexibility, right? So when you're looking at AI-based solutions, we think it's extremely important to look at not only just what the background is for those solutions, what their history of innovation is, or what their track record is when it comes, or their profile is when it comes to security and privacy, but also, how can they be leveraged in the future? How flexible are they, and how scalable are they? And we really feel that at least IBM Watson is a leader in this space. There's other, very large companies out there and vendors out there that produce AI solutions as well, but we feel like this is really important. So Jan, I'll let you kind of talk from here on that.
Yeah, having been on the inside as a former chief development officer, this is key, right? Because your chief information officer, your chief legal officer, your compliance folks, your HIPAA folks, this is where using AI effectively to advance our programs is going to make those folks a little uncomfortable. So making sure that you and whomever your partner is on your donor AI articulates the extent to which this security, this privacy, all of these compliance efforts have been put in place is what will give your C-suite leaders comfort in really applying AI to all it can do to advance your program. So it's really important to sort of create credibility and comfort with some of your C-suite folks as you bring AI into your program.
And Jan, I know one of our goals today is to make this understandable for folks, and I spoke kind of about the different types of AI and some of the applications at a general level or a technical level, but tell us more about kind of specifically how AI can work in philanthropy programs in healthcare.
Yeah. So obviously AI is richer data, right? It is more qualitative, not just quantitative. And so when you add that qualitative aspect, it allows you to take things you're already doing, right? We're already doing prospect identification. Y'all are doing that really well. But how do you take it to the next level? So AI is really how do we get to the next stage, right? How do we identify prospects that are maybe not the usual obvious suspects, but using AI and how donors give and how donors think about us to identify folks we wouldn't have necessarily found in our traditional predictive modeling work. With constituent engagement, how do we dive deeper to understand how and why our donors are giving and when they're giving, with what frequency, and what adjustments then with that data can we make to get our folks to the table more frequently, and or to get our $25,000 donors to be $50,000 donors, and or to think about a planned gift based on using that deeper qualitative data to help us understand how to have those conversations. With channel preference, right? How are we using social media? How are we using our annual fund? How are we using our email? By getting more qualitative and donor AI information, it allows us to customize and allows our giving officers and our marketing and communications folks to refine with each donor down to the granular level of how are we communicating with donors, with what frequency, and with what channel are they going to be most responsive to. Um, Resource planning is the key one, right? So most of us will look at our staff and say, well, our history shows us that if we hire a new MGO, that MGO will be raising 10 times their salary within 3 years. And that's how we make our argument, and that's what we do. When we use AI, we can take that to a much more data-driven and precise level. So we can look at if we bring in a new MGO because we're going to ramp up pre-campaign or we're going to go into a campaign, we can, based on our donor AI models, tell you that within 9 months, that MGO will be raising X amount. And with 18 months, that MGO will be raising X amount. This is critical at a time when we've got tight budgets and we're fighting for every dollar that we get. To be able to use AI to be much more scientific and data driven, and give much better information to the folks who decide our budgets and approve the work that we're doing, this resource planning. It allows us to say, all right, how do I want to use my resources most intelligently, and how can I sell that to my board and to my CFO and to all of those folks? With risk adjusted campaign pyramid, right? We all have our campaign pyramid, and we can predict it's $100 million campaign, and this is what we're looking at. By using donor AI, we can get much more granular and precise, and get much better timing on where we're going to be in our campaign at various levels in the pyramid. And we can start to identify much more quickly where our gaps are. Our gaps in the tip of the pyramid, and therefore we need to start doing some prospect ID around that, or some different kinds of constituent engagement there. Or are we at the middle of a campaign and we've kind of stalled a little bit? So let's use donor AI to figure out why we're stalled and where we're stalled and how we get past that stage. And then program simulation is also similar in that if we know we're doing 6 mailings a year and that's costing us X amount in our annual giving program, how would our fundraising change by going to 8 or going to 10? And at what point, where's the diminishing returns? Where's the right number so that we use, whether it's our events, whether it's annual giving, whether it's small parlor engagement activities, will changing those, donor AI can help us understand how adding, subtracting, or changing some of those program aspects of what we do will give us the biggest bang for our buck. And that, again, is vital when we've got big numbers we've got to hit, and we've got, resource limitations.
So, Jen, I know we're talking about what AI is, we're talking about the impact it can have. I think connecting the dots between the two is important, right? So where does it fit in? How do we get started? We have our starter pack, or starting with some essential models that, of course, I'll talk a little bit more about, but you can maybe help us connect those dots a little bit more.
Sure. And when I came into this, I'm a fundraiser, right? So I'm not a data expert. And as I started to learn about this and learn about how we can use donor AI to advance our programs, and the thought that I could start with a donor AI program if I'm a chief development officer that's a $10,000 program to make a real difference, it really debunked a lot of myths for me. And so I think it's important to look at donor AI as not, again, that silver bullet. We're going to use it once and it's going to do this thing, but where am I in my program? Where are my pain points? And how do I best use this to get me past where my stumbling blocks are, or where I need to invest to get us to the next level?
And again, this is leveraging true AI, right? So whether we're looking at campaigns or we're looking at engagement, right? And we're looking at, I think I mentioned earlier about an affinity score, right? One of the things, or examples I like to give about leveraging AI in this space, the affinity score I had at the time, and I was still at the system when the pandemic hit, didn't reflect the diminished impact on events, right? We stopped having events for a period of time. Well, with an AI score, AI would adapt and AI would adjust to be able to reflect that, hey, we're not having events anymore. We need to weight event attendance less in terms of affinity and so forth. And I think that's key. And it really is. So when we talk about starting with the essentials, we've kind of pulled together the 4 most common models or questions that we've worked with clients on that we're typically asked, to put them into a package that's very accessible to folks so that they can really get started with some of this predictive AI, and see some immediate impact. So the models that we've pulled together that we consider to be essential, There are two at the top of the pyramid, or two for individual giving, the major giving model and the planned giving model. And again, I want to emphasize these are AI models. So these aren't scores based off of, a set scoring formula. These are leveraging AI to look at big data and all the data that's available to predict who's going to be the most likely to make a major gift. In our case, we've defined it at 25K here, but regardless, you can, set those thresholds when you do custom model building. Also, planned gift. Who's most likely to make a gift using one of those estate methods, right? We can use AI and leverage AI to help provide us that information. Now, of course, it's still up to us as humans to make use of that information and figure out, okay, these are the folks who are most likely to make these gifts. Are we already engaging with them? Are they already assigned to our portfolio? What's the situation there? But these scores, which may be different from scores you see at other vendors or through other mechanisms, are truly leveraging AI. And then there are two models more at the base of the pyramid. So we get oftentimes asked by clients to work with them on things like renewals and reacquisitions. We know from a renewal standpoint that it costs way more to acquire a donor for that first gift than it does to keep a donor giving over time. And we also know that the more a donor gives and the more they renew, then the more the increase in the lifetime value of that donor that occurs. But reacquisition is another one, right? AI can really help us look at who is no longer given, who has stopped, but who is most likely to re-engage or reactivate and start giving again. So these models are just indicative of some of the type of modeling work that's available out there. We do it with our clients. There are other vendors who leverage AI in this space as well. But these are some that we felt really highlight kind of how easy it is to get started using true AI and in a way that produces results, right? And again, trying to connect those dots, right? So I'm talking about identifying major gift prospects, and I'm talking about the technology behind it and the machine learning and the AI that's being used. But it's actually not as complicated to leverage as you might think, right? You get a major giving score that's been produced from AI. You identify your top prospects who are unassigned, right? You adjust the gift officer's portfolio and you perform portfolio management, and then you ultimately raise more money. It's sometimes it can feel extremely complicated, and it doesn't have to be, and it isn't really. Also, from the renewal standpoint, right? The renewal scores can help us enhance our segmentation, can help us focus on those who are most likely to renew, right? Maybe we send two appeals to folks who are less likely to renew, but up to three or four to folks who are more likely, right? We can really be more efficient with our resources and more targeted. And then, of course, we can increase our renewal rate by those additional and targeted engagement efforts. And I do want to share that all of this is not just in theory. As I mentioned, we've been leveraging AI for quite some time. A lot of our clients that we've worked with have seen success using it. I know there are others out there that have either deployed AI internally within their shop or have worked with other vendors who have seen success. And it doesn't have to take a really long time. One of the examples up on the screen now is from a client who within 3 months got a new six-figure gift from a donor that they wasn't even on their radar until they worked with us on some AI modeling and it identified this as a potential prospect. You can also see where another client raised 200 million in a year and a half by working with us on some of the campaign work that we did leveraging AI. So there are, real results, tangible results that have been proven leveraging AI. I know the generative side is very new and folks are still trying to navigate that space, but especially on the predictive side, there is a proven track record and history there.
So with all of this, we're not talking about you doing something differently. What we're talking about is giving you the tools to do it better, smarter, faster, and more economically. And again, especially as budgets stay tight, how do we use our resources so that we can demonstrate a stronger ROI in our program? And so whether it's donor retention, engagement, which of course then leads to database and pipeline growth, which of course then leads to major giving and principal giving results. I think especially in the grateful patient space, we've launched these grateful patient programs. They're running at various levels of success. AI can be instrumental in taking the Grateful Patient program to the next level, really helping get past that plateau, which I think a lot of grateful patients come to after a couple of years. And how do you leverage it better for different service lines within your health system, for different donor database types, all of the above. And same with campaign planning. As you're getting into campaigning and planning for that campaign, how are we going to need to staff it? How are we going to need the resources? What's our goal and our stretch goal? And how do we use AI to do that better, smarter, faster than we've ever been able to do it before?
So when we're looking at AI and there's so many options out there, and we're trying to figure out kind of, what do we need? What do we not need? Where do we start? How do we approach this? There are a few different ways you can come at it. One of the things that we offer is an AI readiness assessment where we help kind of evaluate your strategy and how AI can play a role in that. What's your data management look like? What is the AI literacy of your staff? What kind of tools do you already have available in your organization? And really kind of evaluate what your next steps might be, right? Because you need to look at what are your goals, right? Ultimately, how can AI help you achieve those goals? Don't look at the adoption of AI because AI is the new big thing or because AI is the big buzz or we never want to advocate for adopting technology for the sake of technology. We want it to align with the goals and the strategy that you have. AI can be complex, right? We as a consulting partner try and help it simplify it for you. Other vendors are trying to make their AI offerings simple and easy to use, but it can be complex. And with that complexity, you do need to look at your resources and how are they positioned to leverage those AI tools and leverage AI. And again, from a tools perspective, what do you already have access to? Chances are you already have some things in your shop that you could leverage with AI. If you're a Microsoft shop and you're using Outlook and Office, then you probably have access to Copilot that you can leverage, right? So there may be things already available to you that you can tap into to basically get started and starting to use things. And when you're really kind of making that evaluation, it can be difficult. I'll also say we have launched on our website, and I don't think we have a reference to it here, but I can certainly provide it to anyone who is interested, a self-assessment. So you can actually go to our website and complete some questions that will help you kind of figure out, what do I need? Where do I go? How do I start? And then I know one of the big questions that comes up is, what does that mean from a budget impact perspective? So, John?
Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing. It's like anything else we do. You can buy a Ford Escape and you can buy a Bentley, and there's anything in between. What do you really need? And really looking at again, not AI as some expensive sweeping thing we're going to bring in, but looking at where are our current pain points, where are we seeing the most potential for some growth, whether it's in Grateful Patient, whether it's a campaign, whether it's our donor retention issues, and our SciBunts and our LIBunts. Where could we maybe use AI to get us to that next level and get us there faster and smarter and more efficiently and more economically? And then applying that judiciously. I think it's important that again, it's not a full program. We're going to apply this across everything we do. We're going to look at where we want to grow, where we think we have the most opportunity, and how can we apply this data and this technology to get there smarter and faster. I know we do this. I'm sure other people do Also, there are beta test opportunities as well, where you can get more for less because as we test new things, you can be our partner in that. And Josh, I don't know if you want to address that at all.
Yeah, I could say a little bit more about that. As we've kind of developed and evolved our predictive offering and our donor AI offering, we've partnered with other vendors in the space. And with each new vendor who we partner with, we have a beta testing pilot or a beta pilot phase where there's incentive pricing for folks who want to participate, but maybe don't want to fully invest yet, or maybe even want to use that as their opportunity to kind of dip their toe into the AI pool. Right. So there are those opportunities. By all means, please reach out to me if that's something that you feel like you may be interested in. But it generally is a good opportunity for clients who don't necessarily have a large budget allocated to AI efforts to be able to take advantage of AI, leverage AI, and even test out some of the AI offerings for them with a very low cost and a very accessible entry point. So with that, I will move on to some of the risks around AI because we can't talk about AI without talking about some of the risks. Some real, some perceived. I know some colleagues of mine did a whole webinar around debunking some of the myths around AI, so I won't take up that much more of our time, and I know we want to get to questions pretty soon. So I'll just start with like, what are the risks? Well, with anything that we do with data, one of the biggest risks is around privacy and security, right? We know that there's a lot of regulations in place now to help try and protect our data, especially in healthcare. We have HIPAA, and there's more stringent requirements there. I do part of a HIPAA training for AHP, and I talk about how health records on the dark web actually are more valuable than financial records. They bring more money from bad actors. So there is always that risk. And we've already talked a little bit about the importance of security and privacy there. There are other risks around AI when you're using data. Bias and inclusion is a big one, right? When you're using data to predict outcomes and there are um, maybe just undesirable biases within that data. How do you feature engineer or prompt engineer or make sure that your AI is accounting for those biases so that it's not perpetuating those? And then with the whole generative AI side, you start moving from some of the risks into some of the limitations, and the line becomes kind of more blurry. When you get into generative AI, I hope I've given you at least a little bit of insight into how the large language models are built on top of the giant data sets using machine learning, but essentially they're built to provide logical responses, not necessarily accurate responses. So if you hear the term hallucinations when they're talking about ChatGPT or Copilot or any of those large language models, that's an example where logically it makes perfect sense, but as humans, we know that that is far off the mark. That comes into play too with like terms that can be used in different ways in different contexts and some of that natural language nuance and whatnot. I mean, it can literally, some of the ChatGPT examples that I've seen around hallucinations can literally produce things that look fantastic and make perfect sense. And then if you start fact checking them, have never happened and aren't even close to being the case. One example for our healthcare organization I saw was the large language model was asked who the new CEO was of an organization, and it provided the response that it was the previous COO, which actually wasn't the case. But logically, for some reason, this model had inferred and had been trained to think that, in a lot of cases, the COO becomes the CEO. And based on this person's background, this would make sense or whatever. So it made a lot of sense. It was just wrong. I mean, it was just wrong. So accuracy is a limitation when you're dealing with that. There's also something referred to as model decline. And I think this is useful to know for people who are interacting with AI because it simply means, and a good example of well, let me talk about what it means and then I'll give the example. And I'm trying to hurry because I do know we want to get to questions on time, but it simply means that the models over time are adjusting to inputs. And the more we use AI, the more the inputs we're providing are AI generated. and that can cause problems. So if you look at, some of you may be using OCR, optical character recognition for your gift processing, or if you're using caging or lockbox vendors, they may be using it where like the post office does, right? It uses technology to decipher handwriting. Well, if you just take the numerals 0 through 9 and you train a model to be able to decipher it, it's going to be a certain degree of accuracy. Call it, let's say 95% of the time, it's going to get it right. Well, then if you start using generative AI to produce things that look like handwriting and produce these numerals 0 through 9, they're not going to look as clear as if a human wrote them, and they won't be as diverse. So then if you start using those samples as input to the models that are reading these characters, it doesn't take a lot of iterations or a long time for what it starts generating for these numerals to be indecipherable completely. So there are risks, there are limitations. We can literally spend a half-day workshop talking about them, talking about how to mitigate them. The important takeaway is there are steps you can do to mitigate them, right? There are things you can do to ensure the privacy and security of your data. There are steps you can take to engineer your AI solutions or work with your vendors who are providing them to minimize accuracies, to work on minimizing any unintended biases and things along those lines. So that's the big takeaway there.
So I think the other thing is, when, right? Is the timing right? Are we big enough? Is my pain point severe enough that donor AI is going to make a difference? I'm mid-cycle in my budget process. So when should I start even thinking about this? And when should I start talking to somebody? We're going to change databases, right? That's happening all the time. So I probably have to hold off on all this. So I think there is a lot of again, we're fundraisers. We're not data folks, right? Our operations folks are great operations folks, but they may not be computer experts or data experts. So I think it's important that we get out of the mindset of assuming now's the right time or this isn't going to make sense, and ask the questions and really look at talking to whomever, whatever expert you choose to speak with, to start to look at, here's where my program is, here's what I think is happening, if and when and how could this make sense. And Josh, I don't know, on the database system thing, I think that's a big misinterpretation of, oh, I'm either about to change systems or I'm about to add components to my system, and so I have to hold off. Can you address that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, you're completely right. Timing is important, right? Like one of the things that typically you don't want to embark on is a database conversion in the middle of a campaign, right? Those are some of the things like you might not want to try. AI, it's not as, I feel like, limiting. So if you're going through a database conversion, great. Our solution and a lot of the solutions out there are built where they want to look at all of the data that's available anyway, which isn't only in your CRM. So it may be in your online engagement tool. It may be in your digital email engagement tool. It may be from your event management tool. Like there's data all over the place, right? Not just from the medical record side as well. So the CRM, as long as there is data available, it's going to be CRM agnostic. It's not going to rely heavily. So if you're transitioning CRMs, that's typically fine. You already, I thought, gave a great example earlier about how in the middle of a campaign, AI can actually be extremely beneficial, right? So I feel like from a timing perspective, I don't know that there's ever a bad time to look at using AI or leveraging this technology.
So, we're a metrics driven group. That's how we measure our success. That's how our boards ask us to measure our success, and our CEOs ask to measure our success. And it's going to be the same with AI, right? So we're going to start looking at, as we apply these programs, what is my donor retention percentage increase? How am I going to increase my dollars raised or my engagement scores? And remember, with AI, your engagement scores are now much more robust, right? They're much more informative. They're much more meaningful to help your MGOs drive those conversations. So I think that is incredibly important. And also when we use donor AI for resource allocation, this can be tough work, especially in fourth quarter, right? And teams are working hard. They can get burned out. We're trying to keep them working as productively and efficiently as possible. AI operations can do a wonderful job in helping us figure out how do we allocate those resources to reduce burnout and to optimize the success of our team. So that's a really important aspect of what we do.
All right, Jen, I think we did it. We might be
I
a
think
few
we
minutes
did.
later than
I
we
think we did.
intended, but I think we can go on to questions now. I know one thing that has come through is I mentioned AI strategy earlier, and like, what do I mean by AI strategy? Well, it can mean a lot of different things. I know of healthcare orgs that have embarked on exploring deploying AI as chatbots or as a tool to engage with donors digitally. I know of organizations who have looked at leveraging AI for actual digital or base level giving officers. But when I mentioned AI strategy, what I was specifically referring to was how is it going to align with your strategic plan or your annual goals or the goals you have in place today? And then what steps need to be taken to implement that? So around policy creation, around if you're gonna bring in tools, what is the evaluation and the selection process? Look around those tools, around training on those tools and adoption, right? What's your strategy going to be, or how are you going to implement that? So when I referred to AI strategy earlier, that's what I was referring to. Kind of how do you pull those pieces together and don't just go off willy-nilly like this sounds like it could help. Let me do this. But to actually have that strategy in place.
Another question that came in is as a consumer who might be talking to you, Josh, or someone on your team or another vendor, what question, I don't know questions to ask, right? Or I might know some questions to ask of, can it help me do this? But what are some of the things I should know if I'm a VP of operations or a chief development officer or whomever? What are some of the questions I should be thinking of and asking myself and my team, as well as an AI, donor AI provider, as I'm exploring whether this is the right time and the right fit and how it would be used?
We mentioned the beta pilots earlier. I will tell you right now, the ones that are open and that we're taking applications for or candidates for right now include our partnership with iWave. So if you currently are an iWave customer or leverage them for screening services, that's one. And I say iWave, also KindSight as they are known now. And then Omatic is another. I'm actually doing a webinar with them for their folks next week, but there's another one that's going to be kicking off soon in the first quarter of 2025. So if you're a Nomadic customer, that's another place where we have incentive-based pricing, and then you can participate in the beta pilot.
Right. And so what questions should I be asking my team to determine maybe AI is a good time right now to involve in certain aspects of what we're doing, and or when I'm interviewing you or anyone regarding providing AI services, what are some of the questions people are asking about? What are some of the questions they should be asking to assess?
Sorry, Jen, I didn't fully follow it.
So if I'm talking to you and I'm trying to decide if AI is right for my program right now, what are some of the questions I want to ask you? What are the things I should know to be listening for, or so that I can determine, yeah, this is a good time, and this makes economic sense, and my program isn't too small to use this and advance what we're doing.
Yeah, so I think you need to start with what your goal is. Is your goal to explore leveraging AI within your program? Is your goal to accomplish or to utilize it to accomplish specific goals? So it goes back to that AI strategy piece that I was referring to, right? If you are heavily focused and have a lot of goals around growing your donor base, right? That's one thing. If you have if you're in a campaign and you have goals around that campaign, that's another thing. And then from there, you can start looking at, all right, what do I need to evaluate with my vendors? So, for us, we really believe that having our AI solution built on IBM Watson is a key differentiator, and that security is ultimately important. So you need to be asking about how they protect data, how they protect security with their AI offerings. Um, the applicability, we talked a good bit today about what kind of end results should come from using at least our donor AI solution. So you should be asking your vendors that. You should be saying that. Obviously, the budget conversation's a big one, but it's not just, hey, what's it going to cost me today? But what's it going to cost me to maintain and continue going forward with this year over year? So those, I think, are kind of the three big ones, right? Talk about the security and the privacy, and get a good sense that their solution is going to meet your needs there. Talk about the real life results and how you're going to put it into practice and what you should expect from it, and then talk about the financial implications and the budget implications.
Great. All
Are
right,
there
that's
any
awesome.
more questions at this point, or should we
I
move
think
on?
we're getting close to the end of time. We're gonna put our information up there. You should feel free to reach out to us. We'll do that in a sec. We want to hear from you about what you want to learn more about. So here's a poll that is up on your screen. If you can fill it out, that helps us figure out future topics for webinars or information that we can provide for you, either through email or through webinars. And also, if there are topics that aren't listed here, but you'd really like to hear about in the future, if you could type that in as well, that really helps us make sure that we're getting you the information that you would like to have.
And while you're
As I,
responding to that, I do want to point out that the link to the AI self-assessment on our website that I referred to earlier has been shared in the chat. So if you want to just, take 10 minutes to go in, answer some questions, I think it's an extremely valuable tool, and just kind of gauging where you might be organizationally in terms of AI readiness. Of course, it only tells you so much, and we offer the AI readiness assessment as an offering, as well as the other things that are up there on your poll now. So,
Great. And so, as I mentioned earlier, everybody will be getting an email with a link to this webinar that you will have. Josh, if we can go to the last slide, we've got our contact information there.
well, first, I think we want to share that the next
Oh,
webinar that we have from BWF is going to be over a month from now. So in the new year, and our CEO, Josh Burkholz, will be sharing about the 2024 year in review and twin and trends. It's, an information sharing that he does every year that I found valuable even before I joined BWF. So I hope you will join us for that. And then, as you were mentioning, Jan, there is our contact information. So,
yeah. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We love answering questions and would love to hear more from you about how we can do a better job in helping you understand what will get your program to the next level. We wish you all a very, very happy holiday season and a happy and healthy new year. And good luck in the fourth quarter sprint because we know it's a busy time of year. We appreciate you taking time out to be with us.
yes, thank you all for taking the time, and have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Take care.